We're just doing some sound checks. Can you let us know if you can hear us all right? Good, okay, that's good. Loud and clear. That's what we like to see here. Right, so welcome everyone to our webinar on key steps in meeting funding requirements. Thank you all for taking the time to join us this afternoon. I hope you have a cup of tea or coffee at the ready and are ready to listen to a few tidbits we have to share with you, which are hopefully useful. Just quickly about the presenters. So my name is Frank Steiner. I'm the marketing manager here at Ulcc. And I've got with me today Steve Mackey, who's the VP Sales for Education, Heritage and Research at Arkivum. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
And I also have my colleague Rory McNichol, who's the Senior Developer for our Research Technologies team here at Ulcc with me.
Hello.
All right, so I'm quickly going to run through the agenda, which most of you have seen when you signed up. Some of you were so kind to answer some questions as you signed up, so we've got one or two interesting results from that that we want to share with you. Then we're quickly going to look at how EPrints works both as a publications and a research data repository. Then go into a bit more detail why one of our customers, University of East London, runs two separate repositories and what their reasons were, business reasons as well as technical. Then we go into the latest ins and outs of the HEFCE OA plugin, which is a slot that was originally planned to be done by Timothy Myers-Ward, a former colleague of ours. Unfortunately, he can't join us today, so Rory and I spent some time getting our head around it, and hopefully he can give you an abridged version. It would have been nice to have Timothy here because he's actually the one who wrote it, so he can actually go into more depth, but I think we are able to cover the main areas. Steve will then jump in and talk a bit about Arkivum, long-term storage and preservation guidelines, what Arkivum does, how they help people with that. And we're also going to cover the difference between active and archivals, mostly because we're getting asked that question quite frequently, and we just want to make sure that there's a sort of accepted definition, if anything. And then we have Q&As. As you can see, you have a public chat down here, and we also have a Q&A box, so you can post in either, just bear in mind, public chat, as the name implies, is public. So everybody will see it. If you submit questions in the Q&A field, they will be hidden until we either respond to them in writing or pick them up as we go through the slides and the presentation. But do feel free to, don't wait till the end, just raise something when it comes up and we try and respond as quickly as possible. So jumping into some of the questions you answered. One of the questions we asked is, how prepared are you to meet the funding guidelines? And interestingly enough, 76% of you said somewhat unprepared, which I think is quite a high number. One of the things we'd like to find out, because we kept the question a bit vague and generally called it funding guidelines. So just to kind of keep you a bit on your toes and have you do something as well, not just sit there and listen to us, I'd like to ask a follow-up question to that, which is, which is this one. Is there any particular funding requirement that makes you feel unprepared or somewhat unprepared? So do feel free to answer now. I'll leave it open for a few seconds so we can gather results. Yeah, like I said, I think we were all a bit struck by the high percentage of that. So I wonder if it's any particular, or if there's an even spread, or if it actually has nothing to do with the funding guidelines, but with getting ready for them or having the people and process in place. It might be a bit of both. So I leave that open for another couple of seconds to give you all the chance to respond to that. So it looks like HEFCE is the front runner at the moment, which is quite interesting, seeing that it's the most imminent and upcoming guideline and deadline we have to meet. Okay, I mean, do you guys want to chip into that point, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too surprised that most people are here to hear about the HEFCE, hear the HEFCE question answered. So we'll do our best.
Well, at least we're going to cover that. So, yeah. Okay, we're going to jump back because one of the findings, or one of the other questions we asked as part of the registration process was, what is your number one concern in meeting funding requirements? And again, at least for me, quite surprisingly, right technology was like the front runner with that. I personally would have thought it might be people processes or the understanding, especially the understanding because having read some of the guidelines, I personally found them a bit wordy and not very checklisty, but maybe that's just the German in me who likes to tick off a few boxes and know he's done the right thing. But again, it's just sort of, it's something we wanted to share with you, seeing that you took the time to answer those questions. So jumping into the first point, making EPrints work as publications and research data repository. So I hand over to my colleague Rory, who will tell you a bit more about that.
Hello everyone. Okay, so I'm going to give a quick overview of this question. And, well, look at some of the things that they highlight some of the differences between the two and what we do to make it work as a publication repository and a research data repository. The answer to the first, the publications concept, is pretty simple because that's what EPrints is built for. It has a workflow designed around the process of accepting deposits and reviewing and making available. It collects bibliographic metadata and has various things to assist with that. And it also has a couple of compliance assistance tools, a couple that I've listed there, the REOX plugin and the HEFCE OA plugin. So they are, the REOX is something we'll look at very briefly in a bit, which helps with the RCUK requirements, the RCUK policy for sharing metadata about the research publications. And the HEFCE Open Access, of course, is the one that is the hot topic at the moment, which is the compliance around ref submission, so super important. So the concept around the data repository is effectively what we add to the EPrints publications repository to make it data-y, to coin a word, maybe. So very briefly, that involves an alternative workflow using the Recollect plugin developed at Essex and Glasgow that just adds some metadata fields that help you describe datasets more accurately. Then, of course, one of the key differences with the type of digital object that's going in the repository is just the volume and the size of those objects. Whereas we're talking in most cases about some PDFs, some big PDFs in some cases, but they're still not that big. When we're in the world of research data, we can have incredibly large scale storage requirements. Something that we meet with our integration with Arkivum. And then, of course, another set of different compliance assistance tools, because we've got another set of compliance questions to answer. So, of course, we mentioned there's been some reference to the EPSRC, and what they really want you to prove to them is that the data will be accessible for 10 years after date of last access. So that requires cost-effective long-term storage and accessibility. And another little bit of compliance around data is the data site. So to get your data site DOI, you need to supply and prove you've got data site compliant metadata. Okay. So the way this manifests itself, in very brief terms, for publications is a typical set of workflow stages. So the first thing you'll be looking at is to define the type of object that you're recording. Then you upload it. The details are mostly those bibliographical and publication details. Defining subjects, and then there's another couple that we'll go into more workflow stages that are added by these compliance assistance plugins. They're available for the editors and administrators only, and we'll look at those in more depth in a bit. And then here's an example of a data workflow. So this is one being broken down a bit further. Of course, one of the nice things about EPrints is that it's got a very flexible workflow manipulation sort of functionality. So here we have the deposit agreement up front, and then you get to record data about metadata around the data set. We don't ask for the type in this case because we assume we're talking about data sets. And then people and organizations, additional details, which is much more. We'll go, I think, go on into the next slide to see that in a bit more detail to illustrate stuff. So here's some publication metadata. I'm sure some of you will have be familiar with these sorts of screens. Worth pointing out the dates here, which have been expanded to allow us to record a number of dates, and as we'll see for compliance, this is crucial. We've also expanded here the project input, which again for the RCUK and other mandates, that's very a required and necessary piece of data in this day and age. So that's typical publications. If we look at and that's just a few. Sorry, I should say that's just some highlighted bits. There's more to it than that, obviously, in the workflow. So here's the data. So here's some of the differences we see. We've got some metadata that's specifically designed to describe data sets, time period, the location, geographic information, data collection method. And when you upload the data set, you are sort of asked to describe it in terms of a data set, whether or its relation to the actual raw data. So it might be a README file or a license document or whatever.
Okay, we just had a question from Aslam. Is there a DOI plugin that works in EPrints?
So there is the DataSite DOI plugin. I believe there are examples of some people using that for their publications as well. So they use data sites. I don't think there's anything that actually precludes you from using data sites to coin DOIs for publications.
Okay.
Yeah. So and that handles the submission of the mandatory metadata and then records the DOI once you get a positive response from DataSite using their API.
Okay, good.
Okay. So this brings on to an interesting question is, and why the University of East London specifically, but why we might need separate repositories for publications and data. So I went straight to the horse's mouth. I got in touch with Steve Grace, who commissioned the data repository for University of East London, and I said, Steve, why do you need two repositories? And he came back with some reasons were around the organisational sorts of things. So they were very concerned that they wanted to show a strong difference between their publications repository, which is called RAW, and that is an open access repository for full text. And they didn't want to, or they wanted to weaken the remit of that. They also needed their data repository to not necessarily be only for open data, and they didn't want to. Effectively, the idea was that it would confuse and possibly scare people who wanted to put closed data sets in there if they were putting it in what was very heavily publicized as an open access system. Also, there's different workflows. So the data repository is a self-deposit. Suppose expect the academics would be depositing stuff rather than the mediated deposit that happens with the publications repository. And then, so I've added to that a couple of technical reasons. We like to keep them apart because it allows us to keep the associated plugins apart. They're not shared. Although they do work together at the moment, it helps to avoid any potential future conflicts if those plugins are updated, when those plugins are updated, I should say. And another reason is if you imagine that your institution has a policy around the archiving of data, that they want to archive their data, but not necessarily publications. Having two separate repositories allows you to draw a very firm line between those two types of digital objects and say, okay, well, this one the data repository will integrate with Arkivum. Our publication repository we won't, if that's the desired outcome.
Okay, that makes sense.
So once you pull them apart, of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're completely isolated from each other. So this is the UEL example and how they have two data repositories. Oh, sorry, they have two repositories, one data, one publication, but they know about each other. So on every page in both, you get the opportunity, you see in the top little image there, you get the opportunity to submit a new publication or a new data set, which will just take you from one to the other. Also, once a data set or a publication is recorded, you are able to link those specific records. So you can say, well, I know that this publication is associated with this data set, and the repository will allow a link between those two records in the two separate systems. So they are distinct platforms, but they are not in complete isolation.
Okay, great. So as part of the registration process, we gave you the chance to ask some open questions ahead of time so we could answer them. So one that fits quite nicely into what we just discussed is from Donna Sommer from Kiel University. And she was asking, we would like to utilize our existing ePrints publication system. How easy would it be to integrate the ePrints data repository with the publications repository? So I take it fairly easy.
Hopefully I've already answered that question. I wish it was Donna Summer, but I can see on there that it's Donna Sumner.
Sumner.
Yeah.
Apologies to Donna.
Yeah.
There was probably a Freudian typo.
Yeah, there we go.
I want it to be Summer. So
That's your disco party.
Okay. How easy would it be to? Yeah. So it's yeah. Hopefully we've already answered that question. Yeah. I'm sure if we haven't, someone will be on the case in the Q&As or in the public chat. So keep an eye out for that.
Okay. So now we getting to the interesting part where we covering for our colleague or ex-colleague Tim, who isn't around. So again, over to Rory.
Yes. Okay.
To give a HEFCE.
Okay. I shall. I just to quickly say, I do understand how this works. and I hope I'll do justice in explaining it as well as Tim would. So I shall beat my way through this. But of course, any questions, just fire them off. So quickly to say well, it says what we were doing, what we are doing, but it was what they did. So this was Tim and Jisk very crucially working with HEFCE, and the idea was to take the HEFCE policy and work with HEFCE to turn that policy into a set of executable tests that can be run by EPrints, by the platform. Then they said what they didn't do. So there is an existing ref plugin. This is not the same thing. The idea is that you can, the ref plugin is a large piece of work. It's complex workflows and interaction, lots of signing roles and requires resources and coordination in an institution for quite infrequent running. The idea with this one is to build something lightweight, separate from the ref plugin, and something that can be incorporated into day-to-day workflows. It uses some existing plugins, so it's trying not to just load more stuff onto the system. Oh, gone back. All right. And so it makes direct reference to a couple of existing plugins, Reox and Dates. But also it does need to use some bespoke fields. And then of course the results of the process of the compliance testing is recorded, so that when a ref plugin, maybe a ref 2020 plugin or a generic ref plugin, is used to do the submissions and that stuff, the compliance data is at hand. Okay. Right. So this is just a quick diagram of showing you how the workflow works. So so it sort of comes. You record your all important dates with the dates plugin, which I've sort of highlighted in one of the previous slides briefly. You can check your Reox compliance and indeed add some extra metadata should you need it there. And then the ref compliance checker, as we'll see, and hopefully I'll get a time to demo, sort of comes after that stage. Get you ready for your ref exercise. So you get a compliance status at a glance for individual records. It also tells you if something isn't compliant, why it isn't compliant, and suggests remedial steps to fix false negatives. And of course, we'll give you a report on overall for the system for your HEFCE Open Access compliance. We can skip past all that because it's already been released. We're into February, almost March. Okie dokie. So it collects data about a record. So some of that data is already collected as part of the workflow manually. Other bits, and this is very important, are timestamps that you don't get to go override. So it's very the truth is written into this particular plugin. And runs tests, stores the results, and so on. I think go to the next slide. I am hurrying through this so I can get to show you a demo. Right, so the important thing here is that the big long HEFCE policy has been distilled into 5 tests that EPrints will run against your record. And so the first one, it says, does it meet basic open access criteria? So those are things about its discoverability and the fact that you can download it. Then it would need to know that this record was open access within 3 months of acceptance. They need to check that it's discoverable. And did the full text become open access within 1 month of it, your basic open access criteria being met, or the end of an embargo. And then the last check is, was the embargo within limits, the limits set by the different ref panels. We'll go on as this. We'll either get clearer or not as we go into more detail.
Could you with a little decision-making trick?
I know, yes. So, the basic OI criteria. So this is pretty straightforward. Has the record been submitted? So, basically, has it been deposited? If something is sitting in someone's inbox, it's not open access. Once it's been deposited, then you can say that the depositor has made best efforts to make that thing open access. Then we need to discover that with this record that we have an accepted or a published version of the manuscript, and that is present and uploaded. And if the record passes these checks, then it's a compliant deposit. That's step one. Then we need to know that the record met those previous criteria within 3 months of acceptance. So this is where that all-important dates come in, and you need to define the date of acceptance. So the thing that's compared with is a timestamp, so that can't be argued with, but you do get to define the date of acceptance. Okay, and that helps them define this piece called the date of first compliant deposit, which is not the same as the date of deposit.
Just damn a word in there.
So here is an example timeline. This is a nice simple one. Try and keep it simple for my sake as much as yours. The researcher creates a record in the work area. They add metadata. They add the accepted version of a manuscript and submits the record for review. Okay, so once they've done that, they've met the open access criteria. Good for them. It's a nice simple one. Obviously, it can get more complicated, but
we've got a few more complicated ones.
Oh, they're good. So then we have, in this case, the researcher hasn't, they haven't added the file, so the editor makes the record live. It still hasn't met the OA because there is no published or accepted version, and then the editor comes back at a later stage and adds the published version of the manuscript. Now it's OA. This is the batch process. Record complete with. So if you imagine you are taking in your records via some feed with the accepted version, and it's directly going to live archive, it's OA compliant. We're good. Okay, so now we know this stuff, we can test against these fantastic dates. So, did the record meet those criteria? Did it get that tick against the last set of criteria within 3 months of acceptance? And acceptance, of course, is the date, the date entered by the user, that is the accepted date. So this is the date of first compliant deposit, which came from the other one, and that needs to be before the date of acceptance plus 3 months. There's a slightly more relaxed about things that are coming along this year. So these are for records that are accepted before April 2017. So what we need to do discover here is, did the record meet those criteria within 3 months of publication? So what we're saying here is, if the acceptance date is before 1st of April next year, then we would like to see that also the date of first compliance is 3 months before the publication date. Okay, I hope you're all still following me. Hopefully the demo will make this. This one's nice and easy, thank goodness. The discoverability. Once it's in the live archive, it's discoverable. We're not saying that you can necessarily access it at the moment, but it's discoverable via its metadata. People can search and they can browse and they can find it. So that one's easy. Then we go on to the timing of the full text open access. So this is to do with when the full text becomes open access, whether it's restricted, and this is all about the embargo period. So the important thing here is, did the open access, did the manuscript itself, was that become open access within 1 month of the record meeting the basic OA criteria, which we sort of touched on before, or within the 1 month of embargo period ending. So basically you have a month to make sure that people can download the manuscript after the end of an embargo period or that thing becoming open access.
Okay.
Okie dokie. So now we're knowing this, we can look at. So this is the important piece here is the date of first. Can we go back one? I think I'll just do that one. Thank you, Frank. So it just we just first compliant open access. So and that's what we're looking at here. So the manuscript has to become open access within 1 month of the record meeting the basic OA criteria. So that is the date of first open access. Needs to be 1 month prior, or at least under the date of first compliant deposit plus month. Phew. Or records with an embargo. So this is the difference is that they then need to be. It means that you can add, effectively do the same thing, you add the embargo period on.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Back to an easy one. The embargo length allowable for the ref panel. So this is pretty straightforward. As we'll see in the demo, you have a bit of workflow where you say this is going for ref panel A and B, or C and D. They have different criteria around embargo length. So hopefully that slide makes clear that the embargo length needs to be under 12 months for A and B, under 24 months for C and D. And then we have the overall compliance. So to basically the overall compliance for a record, you just look at those 5 tests and consider any exceptions that have been raised, which we'll touch on. So
I think we're going to
should we go into the demo? Yes, and hopefully this. I can wrest control of the screen from Frank.
Over to you.
1 second. Okay, right. So I'm going to do a very simple but HEFCE OA compliant deposit right here and right now.
What could possibly go wrong?
Okay, so first thing, obviously HEFCE are only interested in article and conference or workshop items. So let's stick with an article, otherwise it won't care. Right. So one of the very important things is that we need to put a full text in there of some sort. I'm going to stick an empty PDF in there. So we come to our first bit of crucial metadata here. As you remember, what this needs to be is either the accepted or the published version. So this is where we define this here. So this we're going to say is the accepted version. Some other crucial metadata here that I'm going to leave alone for now is around the access and the visibility to, and the embargo. I'm just going to leave it as a plain old open access, no embargoed sort of record. I should put in some stuff here. And while I'm doing this demo as well, we can have a little look at reox compliance. Why not? Because they're all in there, and we'll show what this is doing right now. So, right, there we go. Let's have something like that. Fish biology. Okay, so here we have again another crucial piece of metadata, the accepted date. So I'm going to say that my treatise on fish and chips was accepted on the 1st of January, and that's the accepted date. Okay. If I'd said this was the published version, I would need to put in both the accepted and the published date, by the way. Okay, and to make this reox compliant, I'm going to stick in a funder name, fisheries, so the British Isles, and project ID. There we go. Excellent. Right. So This is just going to be required by EPrints as a mandatory field. Pop that in. Okay, so this next stage I've just gone into is for editors and administrators only. So your usual depositor wouldn't see this. This just gives you the opportunity to check and amend any of the REOX metadata. So REOX is a metadata profile that RC UK would like you to make available to them, and the REOX plugin basically gives you this interface to show you what it's got in to put in that metadata profile. And if you're missing something, for instance, I'm missing a license ref here because I didn't fill that in, gives you the opportunity to override it. So I'm just going to nick this straight out of the very helpful help text. So excuse me when I put that in there. Some sort of date in there. Let's do everything on the 1st of January. Okay. And now we have the part of the workflow that is from the HEFCE OA plugin, the ref compliance checker. Now, all that you get to put in here, as everything else, most of the metadata that the HEFCE want to check has already been put in. All we have here, well, we have a chance to put in the embargo. I think that overrides the document embargo if need be. The ref panel, which of course is important if you have an embargo, and the length of that. And then you have the opportunity to define a set, some exceptions. These are sort of a set of exceptions that are available to you, that you can ask to be excused from the compliance. So you can basically say, I am selecting this non-compliant thing for ref because of A, B, and C. Right, okay. Next, I'm going to deposit the item, okay? Now, we are not compliant yet. Let's go and find out why. Okay, so the deposit went okay, got a nice tick against that. However, it's the discovery, it's not discoverable and it's not accessible. And of course it's not, because it hasn't been put into the repository yet. It's in the review section, so we wouldn't expect it to be. So once I make that live, I get a nice green tick, and that's a very simple ref compliant piece of EPrints record.
There you go. That was 3 minutes to compliance. Should have called the webinar. Okay, great. I'm gonna take over again from you, and then we jump into Steve's part of the presentation about archival. So over to Steve.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Rory. So Rory mentioned earlier about the use of Arkivum for long-term storage, particularly with regard to data sets which are supporting published research. And so I'm going to just introduce Arkivum for those who don't know us. Arkivum actually provide a managed service for long-term retention of data. And our flagship service actually provides a 100% data integrity guarantee. That's our Arkivum 100 service. In doing that, we guarantee the integrity of data for long periods of time. So if we ever corrupt or lose any of our customers' data, we actually have an indemnity insurance policy which will pay out to the value of that data. So it's a true guarantee which is underpinned by an indemnity. That's quite unique, and in addition to that, we're quite unique in offering upfront, very long-term contracts for retention of data. And this is important for meeting funder guidelines for retention of data sets, in that we can guarantee the integrity, and we can actually commit to storing them for a period of time. So, for example, for EPSRC, that is required to be at least 10 years from the deposit. In fact, it's 10 years from the last access. So it could be in perpetuity for a very popular piece of data. We provide this as a managed service. So we're not just providing technology, we actually run this on your behalf and do all the background tasks to ensure the long-term integrity and preservation of data sets. It's a very secure service. We're audited, certified to ISO 27001. The data is kept only in UK data centers. And the service includes an exit plan, which means that at any time, either at termination of a contract, or if a customer wants to withdraw from the service, or if us as a supplier no longer exist, you can get your content back without any recourse to archival. And I'll detail that just a little bit further on.
Okay.
So for IT and data managers that need a secure, centrally managed service for long-term research data archiving to meet funding council requirements and reduce storage costs. So the key thing here is that we've specified our SLA to meet the requirements of the funding councils like EPSRC, RCUK.
Yeah.
And to do that, we deliver a 100% guaranteed, cost-effective, long-term digital archiving service that integrates into existing data management and storage front-end systems. So, for example, EPrints, and we'll talk a bit more about the integration with EPrints. Also worth mentioning here that the archiving service is available, of course, through Ulcc as part of their service, but also available as part of a JISC framework. So we were selected to be the only archiving supplier through JISC, and we can provide that service both through partners like Ulcc and into your own project if you're building your own system.
Yeah. Okay.
So just a bit about the requirements for EPSRC and RCUK in terms of guidelines, and we're talking here specifically about data sets that underpin research. So currently today that's not a requirement, Rory, for HEFCE. The HEFCE requirement, which comes into force this year, is really about the published documents, not about the underlying data. So the guidelines for data sets underpinning research funded by EPSRC are that the data should be accessible. The availability of it should be promoted, and it should be available for collaboration. So again, it's open access, but it's open access for data, not just for the published research. And that the institution should actually have policies in place for the long-term preservation and curation of that data. So that's quite interesting. And preservation, Archivum do provide long-term bit level preservation. So we will actually ensure that at a bit level we're maintaining the integrity of the data. The same data that's given to us is delivered back at the end of the period, or at any time, bit for bit, identical to the data that's been given to us. You could actually take that a bit further and think about the preservation of the files that actually contain that data. And you could think about the readability and the usability of the data. Those aren't specified, but they could be interpreted as being required in that what is the use of the data unless you can read it.
Yeah.
So it's open to the interpretation, mostly of the institution, as how far they want to go in terms of the preservation of the content and the preservation of the environment that the content is used in. So what's the benefit? Well, it is a benefit to the researchers, of course, and they get their data out there. The more downloads they get, the more citations they get. And in order to get those benefits, what we need to do is to make the deposit of the data being part of their day-to-day, or at least part of the process for the deposit of publications, and not to make it too difficult for them. The concerns you've got, obviously, around compliance, and in that respect, we're providing a service, and together with Ulcc, providing an integrated service to make sure you are compliant. And we're taking care of the preservation. Funding is an interesting question in that there are tools available. So DCC provide a tool, DMP Online, which researchers can use to actually craft a data management plan, which they can put into their submissions, which ensure that they are making the right proposals for the management of their data through the project. And of course, in terms of putting these things in place, you also need to make sure that researchers are aware of the requirements and aware of the resources that you've put in place and made available to them to make sure that they are compliant. And in fact, one of the major learnings we've made together with our customers since the EPSRC requirements came into place is that, if anything, advocacy is the activity that should be started earliest in terms of making a successful program. So the most difficult piece is not getting the systems in place to be compliant. The most difficult piece is making the researchers aware and getting the researchers to use the systems that you've put in place. So just to the right there, and a nice little quote from Kevin Ashley at DCC. The key consideration is to have processes and support in place to ensure that data curation issues are being considered and addressed at the outset of a research project rather than once the research has concluded. Yeah. Well said, Kevin.
As always.
Always, yeah. So the EPSRC expectations in summary are that you should promote internal awareness, and that comes down to the advocacy, that you should provide access to the underlying research data, not just the publication itself. There should be policies and procedures in place to log access requests, and of course access to data sets isn't necessarily just automatic in terms of access to a repository and people downloading data. You can add restrictions, so you can restrict the audiences to which that's available. And of course, some of the data sets being very large, you may provide different delivery mechanisms rather than just direct access. It's not really feasible for you to allow hundreds of gigabytes of research data to be directly downloaded from a repository. There is, of course, metadata associated with it, and Roy's spoken about that. The metadata associated with the research data sets is different than the metadata associated with the publications, which is why there is a case for having two separate repositories for holding the two different types of content. As mentioned, the EPSRC in particular require that the data is held for 10 years at least, so 10 years for the last access, and that the data is curated throughout its life cycle. So as we all know, that there are many things that can happen to make data unreadable. So formats changed, the software that we use to create the data may no longer be available. So, and of course, that at a bit level, data can become corrupted and unreadable. And that's quite easily, it can easily happen in large data sets. So the data needs to be curated to ensure that it can be read whenever it's downloaded. And of course, you need to fund that long-term storage. And the funding councils do allow you to put in a data management plan and to include that funding within the submission so that you have got that set aside for the long-term curation and storage of the data through the life cycle. So benefits, I think we mentioned this for the researcher, and this is where you need to go with advocacy, is it's to their benefit. If they've got data underlying their publications, they'll get more citations, more downloads, which lead to more collaboration and more funding, which is what they always want. And in order to get them to do that, what you really need is to make it simple for them. So one place to go to actually deposit their publications and their data, make it easy and part of day-to-day business, or as easy as possible. And if it's easy to use, they will get immediate payback on the content they've deposited. So make it easy. Give them one system, or as described, at least give them two systems which look the same, which is the two ePrint solution. And that'll help make it a very clear and simple case to EPSRC. So we've got an existing integrated solution with ePrints, which you can source directly from Ulcc as an integrated solution. Rory will talk a bit more in a minute about another solution we've got for very large data sets. And of course, the ePrints software is available for you to build a in-house system, which again you can integrate with Arkivum. DataCite means that the research data is citable, and automatic access requests are automatic or quick to satisfy. So now moving on from the funder requirements, just a little about what is archiving. This is going a step backwards. We've described what we're providing, so now we're going to say what it is. So the first thing is that it definitely isn't backup. Backup is taking point-in-time copies of data for data protection or disaster recovery purposes. So you're taking a copy at a moment in time, and there may be multiple copies, and those copies may well be different from the primary source data. An archive is the copy of the content. So as you move data into an archive, it becomes immutable. That is, it can't be changed, and it is unique in that it is the copy, the reference copy of that data. If it's changed into something else, and it's a completely different set of data than the one archive. So in terms of providing long-term storage, as we do at Arkivum, what we're hoping to do is to provide you with an archive. And of course, if you have only one copy in long-term storage, it becomes more manageable. There is one copy to manage. If you've got somebody looking after you and providing guarantee, it's more lower risk. And of course, what you're after is providing the most cost-effective solution you can. And that's what an archive does. It's preserving data so that it is accessible in the future, which you may do for a number of reasons. So you're preserving data because it has a future value. Unfortunately, with archives, out of a given archive data set, you may not know the proportion on which parts of that archive are the valuable pieces, so you store everything, assuming that part of it has a very high future value. And you're ensuring long-term accessibility, which is the most important thing to meet the open access guidelines, is both the preservation and accessibility. And from an archiving perspective, what we do for you is we actually maintain and guarantee the integrity, the authenticity, the provenance, and the confidentiality of the data that you give to us. So how do we do that? It's based on the principle of active archiving. This is not taking something and putting it on a shelf and walking away and coming back in 10 years' time and expecting it to still be in the same condition as it was when you left it there. Active archiving is actually a day-to-day process, which is to bit preserve the data for up to 25 years or beyond. And we use best practices, preservation best practices to do that. So it's diversity, so multiple copies of data in different locations as much as possible using different technologies, and a chain of custody that ensures that we know the copies that are held out there in different locations are all identical to the copy that you gave us. We do that by a chain of custody of checksums through the whole system. Active management, more complex than you might think. So in terms of keeping data alive for 25 years, it's a lot more difficult actually than just keeping a piece of paper for 25 years.
I was going to say, it looks very busy.
It's very busy indeed. So it goes, this chart actually shows the transition. So as we go from yellow to blue, it's where something's happened that we've got to do to interact with the content to make sure that it's available and preserved for the future. And this can be daily tasks, like adding media to our systems, monthly checks. We do annual data retrievals where we actually read all the data, check the integrity, and take any sort of corrective action we need to make sure that all 3 copies are correct. We refresh our hardware, we update our software, we do hardware and technology migrations. The technology we use, which is LTO tape, there's a new format comes out every 2.5 to 3 years. Well, over 25 years, that's quite a number of formats. And of course, we don't know beyond about 5 or 6 years, in fact, what the technology is going to be. So we can transfer to new technologies as they become available. And of course, we also have to plan for staff migrations, our own staff migrations, and even changes of supplier. So the companies we deal with today may not even be in existence in 10 years' time, and we have to plan for complete changes of supplier and technology over the period. Okay. And of course, also you have to guard against the risk of dealing with archivum as a supplier, and we give you the protection for that is that we give you a exit plan through escrows, which is a copy of all of your data held with a third party who you can go to at any time, and you can recover all of your data without our assistance. And we do that providing on open media, in open format, with all the tools you require for de-encryption included on the tapes. So it's a ready-made exit plan which you can actually invoke either to withdraw from the service or at any time if you just need to recover your data in bulk. So it's a good way. And in fact, I'm told there was an interesting piece on QI recently where they looked at still the highest bandwidth transportation method available for data is still, no, it's not the internet, it's actually a van with tapes or discs in the back of it.
Really?
And that's the way we do the escrow.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that. I think we're jumping back now to other questions we received just as people signed up to the webinar, which follows on nicely from Steve's talk. Is how simple is it to integrate EPrints with Arkivum, and how much development time is required?
Well, the easy answer to that is it's quite simple.
Right answer.
Yeah, there's an Arkivum plugin specifically for EPrints that will manage the transfer of data that goes into EPrints, manage the transfer of that in a couple of ways to the Arkivum network. And then it will also track the status using Archivum's own API to their storage system, as it makes its way around the data centers and goes from in its journey from red to green.
That's nice.
Yeah,
It's a nice movie title.
Yeah,
Journey from red to green.
and most importantly, it will also handle the restoration of data that's been cleared down from the local storage in EPrints, from the archive network, and then onwards onto the person, the user, the EPrints user. So
Okay.
that's there.
Right. And then we had another question relating to how we get data in and out. And obviously, if we're looking at research data, I think the issue is large data sets. So we had that question from Aslam.
And it's an excellent question.
Yeah. We sort of have an answer.
Yeah. So the current plugin at the moment relies on good old HTTP file uploading. Now, Aslam has quite eloquently defined a situation where that would be a very difficult thing to achieve. We have files that are bigger than 2 gigabytes and lots of them. So we have, you'll be happy to hear, along with Archivum, identified this as something to address, and we're in the process of doing that. A new plugin is under development that will effectively allow an easier form of transfer of large files that effectively sidesteps EPrints, so you're putting stuff straight onto Archivum, and however, in a way that allows you to retain the metadata record in EPrints that will still be associated with those data objects. So it's quite a clever ruse. Ruse is the wrong word.
Methodology?
Yeah. Methodology, that's a much better word than ruse. It's quite a clever methodology. And it should be coming on stream soon. It also is worth pointing out, it does also another little bonus it will add is it will allow you to not need to co-locate. So at the moment you need to co-locate the A-store device and ePrints. So the way that we do this at Ulcc is we host your ePrints, we also host an A-store device, and that's used as the gateway to the Archivum network. If your institution already has its own A-store, but you'd like to host your ePrints with someone else, i.e. Ulcc or any other provider, this plugin will actually allow that situation, which isn't currently possible, to be possible. So the data might actually not leave your institution if you have an in-house Archivum, but if you host your ePrints elsewhere, the metadata and the record that's associated with the stuff you've uploaded can be kept there, and no need for massive data transfers across large networks.
Okay, that's very good. I think I see some people typing, so we'll probably give it a minute or two to see some questions pop up. Seeing something about ORCID mapping.
There's a whole symplectic conversation going on there. So apologies to any of the people who don't have it, but lots of people do.
Are they running a webinar right now as well?
Yes, they are. There's a symplectic webinar.
Go to the other webinar.
But I mean, there's what's come out basically is there's lots of people. The route for their publication records is via a CRIS, such as Symplectic or Pure or one of the other ones, and so the need. However, there's still a need to improve open access and make sure that all those key pieces of metadata that allow you to prove open access to HEFCE make their way from your CRIS to your repository. So the conversation that's sort of going on there is around making sure that metadata is crosswalked properly from elements to ePrints. I'm not sure the status of this particular conversation for other systems, but yeah. So if anyone's been sort of following Nick and Jean and me and scratching their heads, hopefully I've explained it as best I can.
One of the things I wanted to say about the sort of bypassing EPrints and the different workflows, I think we could point people to the white paper. Yeah. So Matthew, a colleague of Steve's at Arkivum, has put together a nice ebook, white paper, whatever we want to call it, which kind of outlines some of the possible workflows, and it was part of the JISC research data.
It's called RDM Workflows. It's available via JISC, so they've got to download, and I think Matthew also put it up on Figshare. Yeah. So it's
I think we've got a link. We can include the link in the follow-up.
JISC like us to use the JISC one because again, it's
I see Joe's typing, so she probably. Yeah. So that's great. We had one question from Donna. Yep. Can EPrints manage data requests? Are you able to download? How many citations have been made?
Okay, so I think in terms of citations to things that are in EPrints, that's usually tracked with other systems, the obvious one being Altmetrics. But of course, this is where the importance of recording DOIs comes in. Yeah, so statistics are sort of within EPrints are for downloads from EPrints, but that's slightly different to citations to EPrints objects. So there are other systems that handle that sort of thing. I hope that made sense.
We shall find out in a second. Okay, well, I think if there's nothing else, we have recorded the webinar, so recording of this will be available some point tomorrow or probably Friday. I'll do my best to get it out there quickly, followed by a little follow-up email with some additional information, some additional links to various resources that people might find useful. So for now, if there's nothing else, I'd like to thank my guests today, Steve and Rory. Thank you very much for your time, for coming in. And thank you all for taking some time out of your afternoon to join us, and hopefully speak to you soon. And if you do have any questions in the meantime or think of anything, please feel free to just email us, tweet us, respond to emails we've sent you previously. We will try and get back to you as best as we can. So thank you very much.